From confusion to clarity, the journey of a soul is never a straight line. It's full of turns, doubts, highs, and moments where you feel like you're on the edge of something but don't know what. That was the case for Ali, once known as Maliki Clique, a man who walked through life with faith, but without peace. Raised with Christian teachings, he had questions he couldn't shake, questions that echoed in his heart late at night. He believed in God, no doubt. He prayed. He searched. But something felt missing, like he was walking toward the truth with a blindfold on. It's hard when you grow up with a certain worldview, and then life starts to pull at the cracks in that foundation. You begin to wonder, what if what I've been taught isn't the whole story? That kind of inner struggle doesn't get loud, it whispers. It nudges, and it keeps going until you start listening. Ali didn't reject what he came from out of anger or rebellion. He respected it. But his soul was craving something more, something deeper, something unshakable. As he dug deeper, he encountered Islam. At first, like many do, he had reservations, misconceptions. The media doesn't make it easy to see Islam for what it really is. But the more he learned, the more he saw past the noise. It wasn't just a religion of rules, it was a faith of purpose. It wasn't just about rituals, it was about real connection to the Creator. He started to read the Quran not as a critic, but as a seeker. And what he found didn't just make sense logically, it hit his heart in a way nothing else ever had. He began to realize that Islam wasn't foreign, it was familiar, like it had always been there, waiting for him to notice. The concept of Tawheed, that there is only one God with no partners, no confusion, brought peace to his searching mind. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, wasn't just a historical figure, he was the final messenger, the seal of the long chain that began with Adam, continued through Moses and Jesus, and ended with him. Suddenly the pieces fit. The confusion started to fade, and in its place came clarity. But even when the truth is clear, accepting it is not easy. It takes courage to step into the unknown, to leave behind labels, to face judgment, to change your life entirely. Yet when the heart is ready, no obstacle feels too big. Ali reached that point. He knew this was no longer about opinions or background, it was about truth, about answering the call he'd been hearing for so long. When he finally said the Shahada, his voice shook. It wasn't weakness, it was weight, the weight of years of searching, the weight of a soul finally finding home. And in that moment, all the confusion, all the questions, all the struggle had dissolved. There was only peace, a peace that can't be explained, only felt. The journey from confusion to clarity is proof that when a heart is sincere, Allah guides it exactly where it needs to be. The search that led to submission didn't begin with a desire to change religion, it began with a desire to understand. Ali wasn't trying to break away from his roots or rebel against what he was raised with. He was simply looking for the truth, and he was willing to go wherever it led. That kind of honesty is rare. Most people stop when the truth starts to feel uncomfortable, but not him. He kept going. He kept questioning, digging, praying, reflecting. He didn't want temporary comfort. He wanted something real, something that would stand strong even when life got hard. And that's exactly what led him to Islam. It wasn't a quick process. In fact, it was years of sitting with questions that had no satisfying answers. Why is God three and yet one? Why do I feel like I'm praying but not connecting? Why does faith feel complicated when it should be simple? These were not shallow thoughts, they were the deep kind that keep a person awake at night. And instead of brushing them aside, Ali leaned into them. That's the thing about truth, it doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, and you have to be still enough to hear it. As he explored Islam, he didn't rush. He wasn't trying to impress anyone or fit into a group. He was studying, observing, watching how Muslims lived, how they prayed, how they carried themselves. He began to notice something that caught his heart: submission, but not in the way the world defines it. This submission wasn't weakness, it was strength. It was peace. It was a kind of calm confidence that comes from knowing you are in full surrender to the one who created you. The more Ali learned about Islam, the more he realized that submission was not about losing yourself, it was about finally finding yourself. It wasn't about control, it was about letting go of the illusion that you're in control. It was about aligning your will with the will of the one who knows you better than you know yourself. This idea moved him. It answered a question he didn't even know he was asking. What does it truly mean to live for something bigger than yourself? He started reading the Quran not just to learn, but to feel, and what he felt was undeniable. These were not just words on a page. They were words that spoke to him directly, that addressed his doubts, calmed his fears, and awakened something inside him that had been quiet for too long. Every verse was like a key unlocking a door he didn't even know existed. And every door led closer to submission, not the kind that breaks you down, but the kind that lifts you up. Still, the decision to accept Islam was not taken lightly. It meant changing his life. It meant stepping into a world where people might question him, judge him, or not understand him. But by now, the truth was too clear to ignore. And when the heart knows, it knows. Ali had been searching for so long, and now, standing at the door of Islam, he didn't hesitate. He walked through with humility, with courage, and with conviction. He submitted not out of fear, but out of love. Not because he was forced, but because his heart was finally at peace. And in that submission, he didn't lose himself. He found everything he had been searching for. When the search is sincere, the soul always finds its way home. Shahada, the moment that changed everything. It's just a few words. But when they're spoken with full conviction, they carry the weight of a lifetime. For Ali, saying the Shahada wasn't a performance. It wasn't for attention. It was the conclusion of years of reflection, pain, confusion, and sincere searching. In that moment, it wasn't just his tongue speaking, it was his heart, and anyone who heard him could feel it. You could hear the trembling in his voice, the depth in his tone, the weight of what was being left behind, and the hope of what was being embraced. People watched it happen. Some knew him as Maliki Clique, a voice in the music world, a man with presence and purpose. But what they saw during that moment was a man stripped of ego, stripped of identity, just standing in front of God with nothing but truth in his chest. It didn't matter who was watching. It didn't matter what came before. All that mattered was that he had arrived, that his soul had been led step by step to that point of no return, and he said yes. There was something sacred in that silence right after he uttered the words, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. The world paused, time slowed. That moment was eternity in a breath. He wasn't just entering a new religion. He was entering into a covenant with his Creator, a promise to live differently, to worship with purpose, to walk with humility, to strive for Jannah. The moment the Shahada leaves your lips, your past is erased. That's not just a metaphor. It's a divine truth. And Ali knew it. You could see it in the tears he tried to hold back. You could see it in the way his shoulders dropped like a weight had been lifted. Because it had. There's a reason why that moment is so emotional. It's not about switching sides. It's about finally recognizing what your soul has always known, that you were made to worship one God. That submission isn't something to be feared, it's something to be embraced. That this world can't give you the peace that only your Creator can. Ali had tried the world. He had lived the music, the culture, the external success. But the heart doesn't lie. And his heart, like so many others, was hungry for the truth. The Shahada was that truth finally coming home. The beauty of it is that once you say those words, your life begins again. A clean slate, a fresh start. And for someone like Ali, who had experienced the highs and lows of life, this new beginning wasn't something he took lightly. It meant everything. It meant he had found what so many are still looking for. And he didn't just find it, he accepted it. That's the real courage. Not just seeing the truth, but submitting to it, choosing it, living it. The ripple effect of that moment has been massive. Thousands have seen his story and felt something shift in themselves. Because when someone takes that step sincerely, it touches the hearts of others. It wakes something up. It reminds us that guidance is real, and Allah chooses whom He wills. The Shahada was Ali's beginning, but it was also a spark for countless others who were on the edge, just like he once was. One moment, one sentence, and a lifetime of searching finally made sense. Truth hits different when the heart is ready. You can hear the same words 1,000 times, but they won't mean anything until your heart is in a place to receive them. That's exactly what happened to Ali. Islam wasn't new to him. He had heard about it before, seen Muslims before, even had conversations about faith. But back then his heart wasn't open. It wasn't the right time. So the truth just passed by like background noise in a world too loud to notice. But something changed. Life humbled him. Experiences made him reflect. He started asking questions that didn't have easy answers. And little by little the noise faded. That's when the truth hit. It didn't come with fireworks. It wasn't a grand revelation all at once. It was quiet. It was subtle. But it was undeniable. Islam started to speak to him, not just through words, but through its essence. He began to feel the weight of its message. The simplicity of its core belief that there is only one God and nothing else deserves to be worshipped began to settle deep in his chest. He started to see the beauty and the discipline, the structure, the mercy of Allah that covers even those who feel undeserving. The truth was always there, but now his heart was finally ready to hold it. That readiness didn't come easy. It came through struggle, through nights of wondering what's missing, through wrestling with doubts and facing uncomfortable truths about the world and himself. That's how hearts are softened, not through ease, but through the fire of life that burns away pride, arrogance, and illusions. Ali didn't find Islam because someone convinced him with fancy words. He found it because Allah prepared his heart. And when that preparation is complete, even a single verse of the Quran can change everything. Even one sincere prayer can flip the direction of a soul. Truth has a way of revealing itself exactly when you need it. And when it comes, you don't just understand it, you feel it. It aligns with something deep inside, something that's been waiting, aching, longing. That's what happened when Ali started reading the Quran. It didn't feel foreign. It felt familiar, like it was answering questions he had been asking his whole life. Questions about purpose, about God, about what it truly means to live. The truth didn't feel like an argument, it felt like coming home. That's the power of divine timing. That's the difference between hearing something and being ready to hear it. Ali had to go through what he went through to get to that point. He had to be emptied out before he could be filled. And once his heart was open, everything changed. The verses made sense. The prayers had meaning. The call to prayer wasn't just a sound, it was a call to his soul. And he answered. That's why guidance is a gift. You can't force it. You can't manufacture it. You can only seek it with sincerity and hope that Allah opens the door. Ali knocked on that door for years, sometimes without even realizing it. And when Allah opened it, the truth hit him like a wave. Not to break him, but to cleanse him. Not to scare him, but to free him. When the heart is ready, even a whisper of truth can shake the world. From Maliki Clique to Ali, a new name, a new life. This transformation wasn't just about religion. It was a rebirth. The name Maliki Clique carried with it a history, a persona, an identity rooted in a past that no longer fit who he was becoming. It represented a chapter that was loud, expressive, full of energy, but also full of inner battles and unanswered questions. It wasn't fake, it was real, but it was also incomplete. And as he walked closer to Islam, that old identity started to feel heavy. Not because it was bad, but because it didn't reflect the man he was evolving into. That's when he knew it was time for a change. Taking the name Ali wasn't just symbolic. It was a declaration. A moment of truth where he left behind what the world expected of him, what his past demanded of him, and stepped into who he truly was. The name Ali carries meaning. It's a name connected to strength, to dignity, to faith. It's a name of legacy, of honor, of one who stood with the truth, no matter the cost. And for him, choosing that name wasn't about impressing others, it was about honoring the new life he had chosen, the new path he was committed to. There's something powerful about shedding the old version of yourself. It takes courage, because people around you might not understand. They might still call you by the name they knew, still associate you with the person you used to be. But Ali wasn't trying to erase his past. He was simply refusing to be defined by it. He was building something new, a life rooted in faith, in purpose, in connection with Allah. A life that didn't need validation from the crowd. A life where he could finally breathe. With his new name came new responsibility. He wasn't just representing himself anymore, he was carrying the identity of a Muslim. And he took that seriously. This wasn't a trend for him. It wasn't a phase. It was real. He started learning, praying, fasting, surrounding himself with people who reminded him of his purpose. And the more he did, the clearer everything became. What he once chased no longer mattered. What he once valued no longer held weight. It wasn't about fame or music or image anymore. It was about submission. It was about pleasing the one who had guided him out of darkness. People who knew him before saw the change. Some were shocked. Some were confused. Some were inspired. But no one could deny it. Ali was different. His energy, his tone, his priorities, they all shifted. That's what happens when you align with your fitrah, your natural disposition. You become calm, focused, unshaken by the chaos around you. That's what Islam gave him. And that's what the name Ali represents, a man who stood for something greater than himself. His story reminds us that it's never too late to transform, that your past doesn't have to define your future, that when you surrender to the truth, you find a version of yourself that's more real than anything you've ever known. The journey from Maliki Clique to Ali wasn't just about changing a name, it was about changing direction. It was about choosing light over confusion, purpose over popularity, and submission over self. Sometimes the most powerful step forward begins with letting go of who you used to be. One God, one message, one unshakable faith. That's what it all came down to for Ali. After years of spiritual searching, theological debates, and personal struggles, the noise of the world fell silent when he embraced the simplicity and clarity of Islam. In a world filled with endless opinions, divisions, and contradictions, this message stood alone, firm and unmoved. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his final messenger. No confusion, no intermediaries, no mental gymnastics, just the pure, undiluted truth that resonated with some beat inside his soul, something that why it was there. The idea of one God wasn't foreign to him. He grew up with belief. He was taught to love God. But what Islam showed him was that belief in one God wasn't just a concept, it was a way of life. A complete submission to the Creator in every aspect, not just on Sundays, not just in times of trouble, but in every breath, every step, every decision. Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, wasn't just a theology, it was a lifeline. And when Ali grasped that, it was like a weight had been lifted. The confusion melted away. The questions stopped echoing. The faith became real. With one message came a sense of direction. The Quran wasn't just a book. It was a guide, a mercy, a light in a world that felt increasingly dark. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, wasn't just a historical figure. He was the living embodiment of that message. A man of truth, compassion, and unshakable integrity. Ali didn't just admire him, he loved him. Because through the Prophet, he saw what a believer is meant to be. Not perfect, but sincere. Not arrogant, but humble. Not lost, but grounded. That's what he wanted. And that's what he found. Islam didn't offer him a fantasy. It offered him reality. A path filled with trials, yes, but also filled with purpose. A structure that didn't suffocate, but liberated. A faith that didn't demand blind submission, but invited reflection, reasoning, and sincerity. And the deeper Ali went into it, the more he realized he wasn't alone. This was the same faith that had guided generations before him. The same message that reached the deserts of Arabia, the coasts of Africa, the heart of Asia, the streets of America. It didn't change. It didn't evolve with the trends. It remained one message, unchanged, unshaken. And that gave him strength. Strength he had never felt before. The kind that anchors you when the world pulls in every direction. The kind that keeps you standing when everything else is falling apart. Faith, for Ali, wasn't just belief anymore. It became certainty. Yaqeen, he knew who his Lord was. He knew why he was here. He knew where he was going. That kind of clarity is rare, but Islam gave it to him without needing him to become someone he wasn't. It simply asked him to be sincere, to seek and to submit. Now when people ask him what changed, the answer is simple. One God, one message, one unshakable faith. That's all it took to turn his life around. And that's all it ever really takes. Because when the truth is that clear, you don't need anything else.